Hi, welcome to MapleWoodian.com podcast. We have on the phone Greg Lembrich. How you doing, Greg?
I'm doing great. Thanks, Joe.
Great. Thanks for being with us. Well, of course, for those who know, you are among the candidates for Township Committee. The June 2nd primary is approaching. And for those who don't know, this is the Democratic primary for Township Committee, which in Maplewood is sort of the big election because there is so much of a Democratic majority here that if you win the primary, you generally win the general. So we try to do as much coverage on this as we can. For those who don't know you why don't you tell them? You've been in Maplewood how long? And give your quick background and family.
Sure. My wife and I moved to Maplewood right after we got married. We bought the house in late 2006 and moved in right after New Year's 2007. So we've been here about 8.5 years. We came here to have a family and raise our family. And our daughter, Cece, was born in 2010, and she is now 4, and she's in preschool, but we're looking forward to her. We're zoned for Marshall and Jefferson, so she'll be starting school next fall in the school system.
And you are an attorney at New York Life?
I am, yes. After law school, I worked in law firms in New York City for 10 years, and now for the last nearly 2 years, I've been in-house at New York Life, which was a client of mine when I was in private practice.
Now, give people the quick, you grew up where, and what was how did you get from where were you born to here?
Sure, I'll try to make that quick. I was born in Somerville, grew up in my childhood in Branchburg, which is a small town in Somerset County,
sure.
Right near Somerville and Bridgewater. And my dad was a local public school teacher. Mom worked for the county doing mostly probation work. And so I hung out around the courthouse a lot and, decided I wanted to be a lawyer. Went to Somerville High School.
Now, you say probation work. Your mother was an attorney, or no?
No. She was a probation officer.
Ah, excellent. Okay, go ahead.
And, so she supervised people who were on probation and parole. I had a front seat to local government because my dad got involved on the township committee and eventually became mayor of Branchburg while I was young. So I went to all the meetings and really enjoyed seeing how local government worked and how all of that functioned. And after high school, I went to Columbia for college.
Columbia University.
Columbia University, right, in New York, and liked it, so I stuck around and went to Columbia Law School as well, and that's where I met my wife. We were classmates at Columbia Law. From there, as I mentioned, worked at 2 law firms in New York, first at Cravath, Swain & Moore, and then later at Pillsbury Winthrop. And then, during my time in law firms is when we moved out to Maplewood and started our family. And as I said, just in the last 2 years, I've started working at New York Life in-house.
And what kind of law did you do at the law firms? Was it insurance-related?
Commercial litigation. I didn't do too much pure insurance law. I got involved with New York Life because I was handling New York Life's Madoff-related work for a few years.
Really? Well, that's deep. That's deep in the news.
Yeah. No, I was. A lot of my time at Pillsbury, the last few years I was in private practice, was sort of divided between working on the BP oil spill case and Madoff-related cases. So you had your hand in some high-profile cases, and you're definitely well aware of big deal cases. Indeed, yeah. I'm certainly worked on a lot of multi-billion-dollar litigations. So I've seen the big stuff. I've also seen some smaller stuff. But yeah, I've definitely seen some of the larger, more complex cases, and I'm still involved here in-house in Madoff-related stuff. Was actually just in a mediation last week where we're carving up a few $1 billion of assets that are going to be distributed and figuring out what the method of distribution is going to be for those.
So now you've been in Maplewood a few years. Then what made you want to run this year? Was it when there was a seat open? Obviously, for those who don't know, 2 seats are up. Incumbent Jerry Ryan is running for his seat, and then Kathy Leventhal, the other incumbent, is not running. That prompted a bit of an opening that you were running against Mr. Ryan and against Nancy Adams. Were you planning to maybe run, or did that opening kind of open things up?
I had thought about running, and some people had encouraged me to run for a few years, and I wanted to, A, get a little more time in town, B, spend time with my wife and my daughter, especially when she was first born, and then I guess finally, wait till I had a more flexible work schedule, which I do now being in-house, a little more control over my schedule. So, between those 3 sort of personal, professional things coming together and the open seat, it really made this year seem like the time to go for it. So I interviewed at the Maplewood Democratic Committee along with 5 others.
Right. There was the Democratic Central Committee brought in interviews for their endorsement. They ended up endorsing Ryan and Adams. However, you were among several who also were interviewed. And tell us what happened. So you went to the interview and...
Yeah, no, I went to the interview, and I really enjoyed meeting them and hearing their questions, and then got the call from Ian Grodman, the Democratic chair, that they had chosen Jerry to run for re-election and Nancy,
right?
Largely on the basis, from what I've heard of their experience, that both of them have been involved in town, either local government or other service for 2 decades or more. And but I was encouraged by by Ian and others to stay involved and to if not challenge now, at least keep it open as an option in the future. And then within a day or 2 after that meeting, was contacted by a number of people actually on the Maplewood Democratic Committee, including former Mayor Fred Profeta and former Deputy Mayor David Humer, who, at the time I didn't know that these 2 guys hadn't spent most of their public life disagreeing with each other.
Yes, that was a big, interesting thing.
But, the 2 of them and a few others approached me and said, look, we really think we need a new generation of leadership. We really think you've got, the kind of ideas, the kind of voice that the committee really needs. And if you're open to considering running off the line this year, we'll put together a team that will help you do that. And, true to their word, Fred and David are my campaign co-chairs, and both of them are using their network and their experience to help me sort of navigate this process of putting together a campaign that really came together right at the 11th hour as the petition deadline approached. But I got my petition in, had 3 times the number of signatures I needed to get on the ballot, and now it's just trying to meet as many people. And the biggest obstacle I find is convincing people in town that there really is an election on June 2nd, and it really is contested, and they should vote.
Yeah, we're just coming off the South Orange Village President election, which I'm sure you watched, and I was a little disappointed to see. I think there were about 2,000 votes in that race. And you're talking South Orange, I don't know what their population is compared to us, but it's definitely a lot higher than 2,000.
Right.
And for Maplewood, I think, and one of the things we're trying to do is advise people that if you are registered as a Democrat, which it's sad that you have to be, but that's the situation we're in, that you do have to vote in this particular election because it is such a close election and there are a lot of issues that we'll get to. But that, yes, that's. But now, do you think you would have run if Fred and David hadn't come to your side? That's a big help to have.
Yeah, no, I was thinking about it, but to be honest, the idea of running off the line without any support, having never done this before, having never been involved deeply with a local campaign in Maplewood. I think I would have found it all a bit daunting, particularly on the time frame. So the fact that there were 2 people that had such deep experience doing this, were sort of willing to step up and help show me the way. Gave me the confidence that, okay, I'll be able to navigate this process. And as I started talking to friends, to neighbors, to people I knew around town, I just really got nothing but really positive encouragement to go ahead and do it. And so everything came together quickly. But, I would say that even though I wanted to do it, I probably would have been deterred from doing it had it not been for the fact that two very experienced people who've been through this a number of times stepped forward and said they wanted to support me and they would help me get through the process.
And one of the big issues has been obviously the post office redevelopment. We've written a lot about it. You've come out and talked a lot about it. For those who don't know, again, it's the 20-unit building with 5 retail shops, 3 floors on the site of the former Maplewood Village post office, which has been relocated. And obviously, the other concern people have is there's a big tax abatement for that. How does this play into your position to run? And to be frank, this could very well be complete before you ever take office. So how do you use that as an issue at this point?
Well, I think the post office, first of all, my arguments around the post office really go beyond just that site itself. I think what we're seeing with the current post office development really brings together a lot of issues and a lot of concerns that I have about how local government is running. I've had a lot of concerns about the transparency, with which local government, the way in which local government has given information or failed to give information to the public at critical stages or at a time when public input could really make an impact. I've been really surprised and disappointed at how little public impact has been listened to. It has been allowed to impact the process. I think you mentioned the pilot, the tax abatement. I think giving tax breaks to developers in Maplewood, particularly in prime real estate, like right next to the train station, right in the village, I think that's a mistake. And I think that this project is going to have an outsized environmental impact that really hasn't been considered. They never considered adapting and reusing, all or even part of the current structure. And, I also have concerns about the character and the charm of our village being adversely impacted by this project, this sort of cookie-cutter building that really doesn't look like it belongs in Maplewood. It looks like what's going up in Summit and Morristown and Westfield, and I don't think people who live in Maplewood want to live in suburb X, New Jersey. Most people who came to Maplewood came here because they want to live in Maplewood, and a lot of people in Maplewood are looking at some of the development that's going on in South Orange and saying, thank goodness that's not us. Thank goodness we're not putting up in the middle of our downtown area these huge apartment complexes and parking decks. And I think that's something we want to make sure doesn't happen in Maplewood, at least without substantial public input. And a lot of people are really disappointed at how Station House turned out, the building across the street, or just across the tracks from the post office where the police station used to be. And the fact that the proposed building for the post office site is being done by the same designer, same architect, and in many ways in the same style as the Station House, I think has a lot of people perplexed, given all the problems that happened over there that we're basically going to potentially allow ourselves to get fooled twice for very little economic gain, selling prime real estate without getting a huge, either sum up front or significant tax relief down the road.
Now, we went to your one of your kickoff events at the Woodland. You brought up some other issues. Why don't you tell people about what you brought up there? I know you were talking about communication, but also more shared services. You tell me what sort of the other issues are on your mind.
Yeah, I really want to take a responsible approach to taxes, and a big place where we can have an impact and provide tax relief is by expanding our shared services. And we've already done some of this, but I think we can do more. I think, there's a lot of opportunities that are ripe for exploration with South Orange, including combining fire departments, which is something that's come close to happening a few times, but I think now the time is right. It's something I've talked to Sheena Collum about and others in South Orange, and I think there's an appetite really in both towns to do that, particularly given the millions of dollars of long-term savings that we could realize with that. I think combining senior services to provide better services to senior citizens. Maplewood, like a lot of communities, spends over $1 million every year on 911 dispatch services. And that's something that we could do either countywide or at least several communities could combine their 911 dispatch. And we could do that much more efficiently and also without having to use, police and fire overtime to cover that when someone's out, because we'd be pulling from other communities and sharing services. IT, there's a number of areas where I think we can explore without decreasing the quality of services that we receive, but just be able to do so more efficiently and more economically.
Now, if you combine fire departments, you don't close any firehouses, correct?
Right, no, yeah. The idea would not be to close firehouses.
So how would you combine, and what would be the savings initially, do you think?
Well, the savings would grow over time.
Right.
As equipment came up for replacement, we'd be able to do that, sort of taking into account a broader area. Also, as people retired and came up for promotion, we'd have more flexibility to not replace people, to do more with less, and to meet the minimum people have to be on for each shift more easily, because the area they'd be covering would be larger, but also the number of people we would need, it wouldn't double. So and one of the things that's going to be crucial to me, and actually was true the previous two times when this was explored, was to make sure that response time, does not change. If combining the fire departments, if there's a plan that comes out that says, well, we can do this and we can save money, but it's going to take us an extra 2 or 3 minutes to get to these people than it would now, that's a deal breaker for me. I don't want to compromise health and safety, but if the chiefs are able to say, we can provide the same level of good service to the people of these towns under this plan as we can now, but we can see that down the road we can save a lot of money. I think that's something that both towns really need to look at and is worth at least considering. And if it's if the gains are what it appears they can be, that's worth pursuing.
But if you're not cutting staff, you're not cutting product or service, how do you save money? I'm just a little unclear.
Well, there would be some staff cuts initially. Yeah. That would be something, because you wouldn't need as many people. And then over time, you could do further staff reductions as people come up for retirement, as people come up for promotion, and also when equipment needs to be replaced, you could do you'd have a larger area to cover, so you wouldn't need to replace 2 engines at the same time, and then. A huge part of both police and fire is covering overtime because there's not enough people to work a given shift. So part of the larger staff that we would have between the two towns would allow us to cover those shifts without having to have people work overtime, which obviously is a big part of the budget for fire and police.
Excellent. And what other areas? I think you mentioned working closer with the Board of Education. What can be done there that isn't being done, and how would that have an effect?
Sure. There used to be, and I've heard this from leaders in both towns and former members of the Board of Education, there used to be monthly meetings between at least liaisons from the Board of Trustees, the Maplewood Township Committee, the Superintendent, and the Board of Education, and sometimes several years ago those just sort of fell off. And I think the lack of communication between these bodies has shown, and I hear that from people in town government. I've heard that from people on the Board of Ed, and I've certainly heard that from teachers and parents of kids in school that have said it doesn't seem like the town and the schools are on the same page. It doesn't seem like one knows what the other is doing. And I think if there's better communication, there can be better coordination. We can problem solve more proactively. We can plan more strategically. And I think when you're looking at the schools spending nearly 60 cents on the dollar of tax dollars, to have meetings at least monthly with the elected representatives of the town, I think would only be of benefit to all the taxpayers. Whether their first concern is the schools or their first concern is safety or their first concern is the land. There's so many areas on which the town and the schools overlap that I think it only makes sense for there to be regular face-to-face communication so that we can be on the same page.
And as you know, the big thing in this town is taxes. The taxes, at least for the school budget and the township budget, I think the township budget was about a $77 tax increase. The school budget is going to be more than a $100 tax increase. And as you know better than I, and maybe a lot of residents know, a lot of our taxes is based on the state funding formula. What can you do that maybe the township committee members who are on now aren't doing to try to help the tax burden?
Right. Well, I think, the one thing that can be a silver bullet for Maplewood and South Orange in terms of our tax problem is not development. We can't develop our way out of our tax problem. There's not enough land. The big thing is to fight for fair and equitable state aid, which we're not currently receiving. And I would like to see, and I think that's something that, the Board of Education, there's only so much they can do, and only so much influence they can have with elected officials in Trenton. I think we need, Maplewood, South Orange, Essex County officials, to really lobby the governor, to lobby our state legislators to, it's not even to change the funding formula. It's to actually get the state to follow the funding formula that's already in place. And, obviously, regardless of what happens with Governor Christie, in 2 years we're going to have a new governor. And for me, a key litmus test in choosing who will all support in that race, regardless of whether I'm on the township committee, is what they're going to do in terms of fixing the education funding iniquities that exist that really put districts like Maplewood and South Orange in a very disadvantageous situation, because people from Maplewood and South Orange end up having to fund aid to other districts and receive very little in return here. So we end up, having to spend on education outside the community, and then end up having to spend on education inside the community and fund our own schools, to the tune of almost 100%. And it's, that's just not fair. And I think that if the town government really stands unified with the Board of Education, we can have a better chance of getting attention from Trenton and hopefully getting some things turned around.
Excellent. And anything else you'd want to add to people, to let people know, since we have you on the phone, in terms of your candidacy or why they should vote for you or vote at all in this?
Yeah, I would mention two other things, and both of which are somewhat related, though not directly to the post office situation. One is that I really want to champion sustainability and Maplewood's position as an environmental leader. I think a lot of people who live and who move to Maplewood really know Maplewood. One of the things that puts Maplewood on the map for many people is that we are a green town, and that we've really been an environmental leader. But I think in the last few years we've started to rest on our laurels a bit, and I think we're talking the talk, but we're not walking the walk as much as we used to. And I'd like to turn that around and really renew our commitment to being a green town and to sustainability. I think the fact that the township committee didn't even consider the possibility of reusing or adapting the building that's on the post office site just sort of speaks to the fact that it's not the priority that it used to be. And the other thing that I would say is if we're going to take development in the direction of high-density apartment housing, I would like to see more options for seniors. Do some age-limited housing, 55 plus, because one of the big concerns that I hear from people is, as they grow older, their kids are out of the schools, maybe they can't take care of a large home or they can no longer afford the taxes on a large home. People who've really helped build the town and who've raised their family here are forced with a very bad choice of either having to stay in a house that's too big and that they can't afford, or have to move out of town. And I think there aren't enough options for seniors to downsize in Maplewood and stay in the community. And when we lose that generational diversity in our town, we not only lose the benefit of our elders and and those who've come before us and the wisdom they can sort of keep, the institutional memory they have in the town, but we also lose an important part of our tax base. We need people who don't have kids in the school to pay taxes. Otherwise, the tax burden on everyone else is just going to be even more burdensome than it is now. So I think, if we're going to explore development, including high-density apartment housing, I think our first priority should be on age-restricted housing for seniors, and that's something that I would definitely push for on the Township Committee.
Excellent. Well, we appreciate your time. We'll let people know they can go to gregformaplewood.com. We will have a link on that with this podcast. And if they want to email you, it is, what's the best email?
Sure, it's glembrich, GLEMBRICH, @gmail.com. So my first initial G, my last name Lembrich, @gmail.com.
And we've been posting and we'll continue to post campaign events for you and also your opponents so people can show up, ask questions, and make sure you vote on June 2nd. Polls will be open, and hopefully we'll get a good turnout. So thank you again very much, sir.
Thank you, Joe.
Be well.
Take care. Bye-bye.